Unworkshopping, the workshop. We are going to present 5 cybernetic principles to help you overcome obstacles in your workshops. The first principle is about variety. In this first skit, for the educator to be successful, she needs to adapt her range of responses or her variety to address the needs of her participants. Let's have a look at this.
Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to this workshop on assessment in higher education. You are all here because you're involved in assessment, right? Right. So we are going to start straight away at the beginning with the most important, the roles of assessment in higher education, and then going straight on to the principles of assessment, which is important for all of you to implement, right? Right, good.
I've quickly paused the video here. Notice how the educator assumes she knows who her audience is and why they have attended. It would be much better to rather ask her participants what their needs are. Then the educator could aim her message at the needs of her students.
So let's start then at the purposes of assessment in higher education, which in literature is often depicted as...
This participant attended the session to learn about a certain topic, but the topic she needs has not been covered and the participant is getting bored.
I want to try and judge what the student knows, what they can is when we would like to...
I wonder if I could draw a perfect circle.
Outcomes and what we expect from them in the foreign when we would like to guide students learning into the direction of what they are supposed to do.
We see that out of 4 participants, only 1 seems interested in the educator's message. If the educator would have just asked her participants what they needed, then the session could have been aligned to the needs of all the participants. So how can this problem be solved? An easy way is to just ask the participants what their needs are. In this next scenario, the educator first asked her participants what they needed from the session. The educator used a Google form prior to the session, and from that, she has adapted her training in a way that seeks to address the variety in her class. That means she has now adapted her content to address what each participant needs from the session.
Good morning, colleagues. From the pre-course activity, I could gather that we are really a diverse group. Just for me to be clear on your needs and expectations for this morning, I would like to share what you have given me or provided me as your needs and expectations, and then you can just confirm whether I have heard you correctly. Starting with assessment plans, there was quite a need for starting afresh with assessment. Where do I start? How do I do my planning for my modules? Then there was also a very specific need of oral assessment and whether that will fit into the university's policy.
So what the educator did is, prior to the workshop starting, she inquired using a form or a survey and asked the participants what their needs are for the session. And therefore, the educator can then create a workshop that is dealing specifically with the needs of the participants.
So what I just would like to verify with you before we start with this workshop is that I heard you correctly in your online Google form prior to the course that I've sent to you.
Since misunderstandings can take place, the educator is verifying that she has understood the request correctly. So she's checking in with her participants to make sure that what she's going to discuss and present in this workshop is what they wanted. So she's effectively closing the loop, reducing any misunderstandings. So here we can see the fruits of this is that the participants are more interested, they are engaged because they are reflected in the curriculum. The curriculum speaks to their needs. Of course, the educator still has her goals and she can intertwine her goals, but doing it in such a way that she steers her work via the needs of her participants. This keeps the participants interested because the participants also provide the trajectory for the curriculum. Now, even if your participants have advised you what they want in the curriculum, how do you know you're getting your message across in an engaging manner? Let's look at Teachback. In this session, we have a presenter who is presenting to a group of academic advisors who are learning how to advise at-risk students. Let's join the group now.
So at today's session, we want to focus on different academic advising approaches. So for now, I want to focus on one approach. It's called...
One participant is playing on her phone. Another one seems distracted and is looking around the room.
Now, risk meaning these students are underperforming. And remember, our students come with other socio-economic backgrounds, and they come with other psychosocial needs as well.
The presenter is about to explain the process that the new academic advisors are meant to follow when dealing with at-risk students. Let's see if the participants can remember the steps in the right order.
So when you find out you have a risk student in your module, what you need to do is, firstly, get the student's academic transcript together with any psychosocial reports. Thereafter, set up a meeting. Use an on-site session, right? And when you have the session, try not to have your laptop opened so that you build a relationship with the student. So move away from the laptop and engage with the student one-on-one, right? Make that eye contact. Ask the student, what is the problem? So the student may say, I'm having financial issues and I cannot afford my tuitions and it's adding stress to me. So you can then say, I can recommend some bursaries that you could apply for.
The presenter now continues with her lesson plan.
Excellent administrator, which is affecting their sleep. Now I see it's time for a break. So let's have a short tea break. I wonder if they were actually paying attention to the session. I did see one on a phone and another was busy looking up at the ceiling. I think when I get back in there, I will just check if they understood the session. So, okay guys, we are back from tea now. Can we have a teachback on the session we had previously? Lunelle, would you be able to teach back to me what you would do if you have an at-risk student?
So I remember from the first session that we get hold of the student, get them to come in and see us, talk to them, and then refer them to the appropriate people, you know, psychosocial support, academic advising, and yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, you have some idea. Anybody else? Marena?
I think she forgot to access the students' academic records and possible psychosocial reports beforehand.
Okay, yes. So that is the first step that you would do, and thereafter you have all the other steps.
It is clear that the first participant didn't get the order right. This participant was playing on her cell phone, and it is easy to blame the participant for not getting the correct answer. But this is not the point of Teachback. Maybe this participant felt the session was boring, and there was also another participant who seemed distracted. And even during the Teachback, that participant was just looking at her laptop. Thus, by incorporating Teachback in the session, the presenter can quickly solve these problems. It is like an error-correcting process to improve one's teaching effectiveness. In summary, Teachback is when a student explains what they've just learned back to the teacher in front of the class, revealing her understanding and thought process. In this method, the teacher takes a neutral, student-like role, asking the learner for their own explanation. An important aspect is that Teachback is not necessarily meant to test the student. Rather, it's meant to aid the teacher to determine if the teacher's message was received in the manner that she intended. This helps the teacher gauge her teaching effectiveness. Depending on how the Teachback goes, for example, was the teacher's message received correctly? If not, this might require the teacher to adopt a completely new teaching approach in the classroom. The teacher determined that her approach was not effective for all the learners. She's now adapted her approach and is now doing role plays with the students. She can then do Teachback again to ascertain whether the new approach is beneficial for the students. Our beliefs and values can have an impact on how we behave. Let's see how this plays out in a training session.
Hello.
Notice how shocked the educator is. She's seen something that bothers her. This is an example of how a person's perception is influencing their behavior.
Hello everyone. How are we today? Welcome to our learning and teaching session. Are there any questions before we begin today?
Will AI be included in today's teaching and learning session?
Absolutely. I'm so excited. We're going to be doing AI today, specifically generative AI.
Ma'am, I've got a question. What platforms are we going to be using for the AI?
We're going to use all the platforms.
Well, I've mainly been using ChatGPT. Is that fine?
Yes, and I've got good news for you.
The teacher appears to be showing bias. While the teacher was friendly toward the other students, the teacher's attitude toward the student wearing the green wig was noticeably tense and unfriendly. This raises important questions. Is the teacher aware of her behavior, or are these unconscious actions? And is the student to blame for simply expressing individuality through their appearance? Now note that the student with the green hair serves as a placeholder for any visible form of personal expression, such as a hijab, a yarmulke, other religious expressions, tattoos, piercings, age. This could also be skin color, gender, disabilities. It is clear that the student is aware that she's being treated differently to her colleagues. There's nothing wrong with getting a fright if you see something you're not used to, but the teacher chose to treat the student with the green hair differently. Why? Is the student the cause of this outcome? Can we blame the student? Causality implies a rule. A, therefore B. Therefore, the green hair should have the same effect on all teachers. But this is not the case. 10 teachers perturbed by the same green hair would have 10 unique responses. What if a person is colorblind? They wouldn't even notice the green hair. What happens if the teacher herself had green hair? Therefore, there is no causality here. The green hair would not bring out the same response in all the teachers. Therefore, it is not a causal relationship. So where does the teacher's behavior arise from? Who is responsible for this behavior? The teacher's behavior is based on her own beliefs and values, which are a product of her lived experiences. Something the teacher observed has bothered her, or something she believes about what she observed is influencing her actions. The teacher has at least 3 options. The first option is she can continue to behave in an unfriendly manner towards the student, discriminating against that student. She could leave the classroom, or she could choose to treat all the students in a professional manner. Since the teacher is responsible for her own behavior, the responsibility lies on the teacher. Let's see how the situation can be resolved by the teacher responding a little bit differently.
What platforms are we going to be using for the AI?
I wish I could cover all the platforms with you guys, but time is going to be limited, so unfortunately I can only do ChatGPT and Claude AI. Have you heard of them?
I've heard about them. Yes. Thank you.
Notice how the student's response is completely different to how it was originally. The student now feels included in the class. The next obstacle is about being too rigid. To overcome this obstacle, one can move from a hierarchical approach to a heterarchical approach. Let's have a look at this in practice. In this first scenario, we have a hierarchical approach to teaching. The educator acts as an authoritative figure, almost controlling the flow of knowledge. Let's quickly join the medical students and the educator.
Just to remind you, we are looking at the communication skills in the doctor-patient relationship. It is about the building of rapport. And in that piece of the framework, it's very important that you pay attention to your non-verbal actions. So the first thing is that you must be looking at your patient straight in the eyes. You must be aware that the tone of voice, the way you sit, and all those things carry a lot of weight. So we are going to be practicing that in pairs now and make sure that you actually pay attention to looking at somebody else directly in the eyes, and that you then explore whatever the questions is after that.
Ma'am, I got a question,
Yes.
right? So my friend, she's African, she's actually isiXhosa, and in their household, she's not allowed to look the elders directly in the face or even turn to them and speak to them in that way. So does that apply, the approach you're meant to do it, irrespective of any culture?
Thanks for sharing that. It's very interesting. But in our curriculum, we've decided to go with this best evidence framework. It's been used in most of overseas countries. And in fact, the whole curriculum has built their assessments on this. So while I hear what you say, you need to follow that standardized approach because we've got a rubric that is based on that.
We can see that in the hierarchical approach, it is rigid. Even though the student brings up a topic which has merit, the educator does not offer adaptation to her curriculum. This can be handled differently. Let's have a look at a heterarchical approach. Let's quickly fast forward to where the educator asks the students to work in groups, but notice that the educator takes more of a collaborative approach now.
Just before I ask you to go into groups to practice, I wonder if there's any thoughts on your side. How do you think different cultures and how people experience illness can actually influence these non-verbal things I was talking about?
Ma'am, I got a question,
Yes.
right? So does that apply, the approach you meant to do it, irrespective of any culture?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's a very valid point, and we will in fact consider that when we review our module, and that is something that we can include in our next rubrics for the exam, seeing that we do serve a very diverse community.
Moving from hierarchy to heterarchy means that we need to think about the curriculum or our training in a way where we are open to adaptation. Of course, it does not mean that we must always accept and agree with everything the students or participants say, but it is an approach that is open to multiple knowledge sources. It also allows for more engagement because the students or the participants get the experience that their voice is heard. In doing so, the participants can also inform the curriculum. This allows for training to be more engaged to the participants' needs and not just based on the trainer's goals. There's a cybernetic principle that says it's the listener that determines the meaning of what was said. What this means is that just because I may say something doesn't mean that you will understand it in the way that I intended, and errors creep into conversation. Here's an example to illustrate this.
I was at your session last week and I heard you mentioned flipped classroom. Please, can you tell me more about it? I'd love to try it in my class.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So it's really when you're taking all the activities that you normally would do in your class, whether it's a PowerPoint or you're showing a video to your students, and you would load all of those sort of materials online to allow your students to actually go through that information before the class. And you may give them some activity. That activity can be in the form of a quiz, right? And when the students come to class, that's when they do other activities with you. So you basically the role of the facilitator. Okay. I'm sure you understand what I mean, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Hi.
That was a disaster. I got such bad feedback. In fact, I think I'm going to be sent for the disciplinary.
Why?
The students complained. I did exactly. I made notes of what you said. I did exactly what you told me to do. You've actually put me in a really difficult position. They complained about the fact that it wasn't in the subject guide and the test counts, the quiz counted for marks. And it's just such a mess. I don't know what to do now.
So I think there must be a misunderstanding because I really didn't mean that you needed to actually give the students a quiz for marks. Because really it was a test for test your knowledge. It was a formative assessment. It wasn't meant to count towards marks. But I didn't know that you would interpret it in that way where I actually...
Now let's look at an example where the advisor is interested in how the listener understands.
So a flipped classroom really is where you're taking all the learning materials and you even put a quiz. All of that then is shared online with the students, right, before the lesson. How do you think you may do it in your class? How would that work for you? What's your thinking?
Note how the advisor checks to see if her message is understood in the manner that she intended.
I'm going to give them the PowerPoints this evening. And then, I noted you said quiz. Yes. I'm going to give them a quiz, an online quiz that counts for 10% of the mark. And that's due tomorrow. And then it'll make it so much easier when I give class because they would have done it already.
So remember, students need time to go through the material. So you've got to give them enough time. Be mindful, remember when we're talking about assessment, a quiz technically would be something that's a formative assessment. It's like a test your knowledge. Whereas once you put marks on it, so unless it's in your assessment plan, it's going to carry weight. The students are going to interpret it in quite a different manner. So just be mindful of those kinds of technicalities before you just...